For 2 years, it could not be caught. The Mitsubishi Zero climbed like something released rather than flown. It turned inside every Allied fighter sent against it, held the air longer, reached farther, and left its enemies wrestling heavy controls while it danced. Over Pearl Harbor, over the Philippines, over the burning airfields of the early Pacific. It built a reputation that hardened into something close to a curse. American pilots stopped talking about it as a machine. They spoke of it the way sailors speak of weather that kills you. Do not turn with the Zero. Do not climb with the Zero. Do not, whatever you do, let one get behind you. And then, on an empty island at the top of the world, one of them simply lay down in the grass. No shell had torn it open. No fighter had run it down. It rested upside down in a cold Aleutian bog, wheels in the air, canopy pressed into the mud, its skin unbroken and its secrets intact. A legend delivered whole into the hands of the men who feared it most. The question that had haunted 100 cockpits was about to be answered in a hangar in San Diego. And the answer would not come from a gun sight. It would come from a mechanic's wrench and a test pilot's logbook. To understand what that meadow gave away, you have to understand the bargain that built the airplane. The Zero was the work of a Mitsubishi engineer named Jiro Horikoshi, and it was, above all, an argument about weight. The Imperial Navy had asked for the impossible, a fighter that could turn like a hawk, climb like a rocket, and fly across an ocean all at once. Every one of those demands pulled against the others, and Horikoshi answered them the only way the numbers allowed, by cutting away everything that did not fly. He drilled holes in the ribs to lighten them. He used a thin, new alloy stretched taut over a delicate frame. He left out the armor plate that might have shielded a pilot's back. He left out the self-sealing tanks that might have kept fuel from becoming fire. What he bought with that ruthlessness was breathtaking. A machine so light it seemed to shrug off gravity, that could hang on its propeller and pivot inside any turning fight in the world. What he could not see in 1940 was the clause hidden in the fine print of his own genius. The very lightness that made the Zero a god below the clouds left it thin-skinned, brittle, and, as no one yet could prove, strangely helpless once it was pushed past the speeds where grace turned into force. The airplane had a flaw stitched into its strength. The Allies suspected it. They whispered about it. But suspicion is not knowledge, and rumor does not win dogfights. To turn the whisper into a weapon, they needed one of these things whole, on the ground, where a man could take it apart and put it back together and fly it to the edge and find out exactly where it broke. They would get one. And the price would be paid by a 19-year-old carpenter's son. His name was Tadayoshi Koga. On the morning of June 4, 1942, while the world's attention was fixed on a distant sea called Midway, Koga launched from the carrier Ryujo into the grey murk of the Aleutians. He was a flight petty officer, young, from the countryside, flying in a 3-plane section against the American base at Dutch Harbor. It was the second day of the raid. His formation came down over the harbor, guns hammering, and in the chaos they caught an American patrol boat, a Catalina flying boat, and shot it into the water and strafed the men who climbed out of it. Somewhere in that low, murderous pass, a rifle or a machine gun on the ground found Koga's Zero, not the engine, not the pilot. A single line carrying oil, opened by a bullet, so that behind the fighter there streamed a thin, dark banner unwinding across the sky. The engine would run, for now. But an engine bleeding its oil is an engine counting down. Koga throttled back, nursing it, and turned east toward the one place his squadron had chosen for exactly this kind of dying afternoon. Akutan Island, 25 miles away, where a Japanese submarine waited offshore to pluck downed pilots from the sea. The 3 Zeros circled a flat green meadow half a mile inland from a place called Broad Bight. From the air, the grass looked firm. It was not grass. It was muskeg, a skin of vegetation floating on black water and mud, soft as a wound. One of his wingmen saw the water glint too late and understood, in a lurch of horror, that Koga should belly the plane in and slide. But Koga had already lowered his wheels. The tires bit into the bog and stopped dead, and the airplane's own speed flipped it forward onto its back. It skidded, inverted, and came to rest in the mud with barely a scratch on its beautiful skin. The machine survived almost perfectly. The boy inside it did not. Koga died in that instant, his neck broken, hanging upside down in the harness of the fighter he had tried so hard to save. His comrades circled overhead. They had orders, standing, absolute orders, to destroy any Zero forced down in enemy country, to burn the secret before the enemy could read it. Their guns were loaded. The airplane sat there, whole and helpless below them. But they could not see whether Koga was alive or dead in that cockpit, and they could not bring themselves to fire on their friend. They turned for home and left him. The submarine hunted the coast for him and found nothing, and was chased off by an American destroyer. And so the prize lay there in the meadow, undamaged and unguarded, upside down at the edge of the world. For over a month, no one on either side knew it existed. It was luck, clumsy, ordinary luck, that found it. On the 10th of July, an American Catalina crew droned back toward Dutch Harbor. They had gotten lost in the weather and were steering the most direct line home, a line that happened to cross Akutan. A crewman glanced down at the empty green below and saw something that did not belong, a dull metal shape lying in the bog, wrong way up. The pilot banked, circled, marked the spot, and carried the news home like a man carrying a lit fuse. The island did not surrender it easily. The same bog that had killed Koga now swallowed every effort to lift his airplane. The first salvage party came out and failed, defeated by mud and missing equipment. A second try failed. Only on the third attempt, with the right gear at last, did they wrestle the Zero free of the muck, drag it overland to a barge, and float it back to Dutch Harbor. There they turned it right side up, washed the bog off its skin, and lifted it aboard a ship. By the 1st of August it had reached Seattle. From there it went south to the Navy's field at North Island in San Diego, where they built a wooden stockade 12 feet high around it inside a guarded hangar, and posted armed Marines and treated a single small fighter as one of the most valuable objects in the country. Because that is what it was. The mechanics went over it like surgeons, salvaging what the bog had spared, machining the few parts they had to replace. Piece by piece, the airplane came back to life, and on the 20th of September, 3.5 months after a bullet had opened its oil line over Dutch Harbor, the captured Zero rolled out under an American star and lifted off the runway with an American at the controls. His name was Eddie Sanders, a Navy test pilot, a man whose job was to take airplanes to the places where they fail and come back to describe the failure. Over the next 25 days, he would fly the Zero 24 times, and he would map, one careful flight after another, the exact shape of the enemy that had terrified an ocean. The very first flight told him almost everything. Down low and slow, the Zero was every bit the phantom the rumors had promised. It turned, it climbed, it answered the stick like a thought. Sanders felt, for a few minutes, why men had learned to be afraid. Then he pushed it faster. At around 200 knots, the airplane changed its character entirely. The controls that had felt like extensions of his own hands began to stiffen, then to set like concrete. Above that speed, the ailerons all but locked. Rolling the fighter took a hard, two-handed heave, and the roll that came was slow and grudging. The god of the low-speed fight became, at high speed, a heavy and reluctant thing, and it was not even-handed about it. The Zero rolled willingly to the left, the way its spinning engine wanted to twist it. Ask it to snap the other way, to roll hard right at speed, and it balked and lagged, a fatal half-second behind. There was more. Sanders shoved the nose down hard into the kind of sharp pushover a hunted pilot makes on instinct, and the engine faltered and cut out beneath him. A cheap flaw in the carburetor. Under that sudden negative load, the fuel starved and the motor simply quit. Nosed the Zero over too abruptly, and for a heartbeat it was a glider. And when he tried to run it fast and steep in a dive, the light, delicate airframe that had felt so magical at low speed had no appetite for it, no willingness to chase an enemy plunging away at full throttle. There it was, the whole hidden ledger of the airplane's weaknesses, written out in a single day of flying. stiffening controls above 200 knots, a roll it could not make to the right when it mattered, an engine that died on a hard pushover, a body that would not follow a fast dive. Every one of those flaws pointed to the same escape. Do not turn with it, you will lose. Do not climb with it, you will lose. Instead, when a Zero settles onto your tail, do the one thing it cannot answer. Roll hard, drop the nose, and dive away at full power. Shove the pushover sharp enough, and the Zero chasing you will feel its own engine stumble, and the gap will open. Build your speed past 200 knots into the zone where the enemy's controls turn to stone, and then brake hard to the right, the one direction the light little fighter cannot follow, and watch its guns swing wide of you, unable to track. A Marine Corsair pilot named Kenneth Walsh would put it to the test in exactly those terms. A hard roll onto his back, a dive at full throttle, the airspeed winding up, then a savage brake to the right while the Zero's tracers streaked harmlessly past his belly. He lived. Others credited the same handful of moves with saving their lives. But here is where the legend of the Akutan Zero must be told honestly, because the truth is better than the myth. That airplane did not by itself defeat the Zero. It did not by itself win the Pacific. The answer was already being assembled before Eddie Sanders ever strapped in. A Navy officer named John Thack had devised a weaving mutual defense maneuver for outnumbered fighters and had used it in combat months earlier at Midway, while Koga's plane still lay in the bog. Claire Chennault's volunteer pilots in China had already learned the hard lesson and preached it. Never dogfight the Zero, dive and run, never turn. And the wrecks pulled from Pearl Harbor back in December had already whispered the deepest secret of all. No armor, no self-sealing tanks, a fighter built with nothing to spare. What the Akutan Zero did was turn all of that whispered, scattered, half-proven suspicion into cold instruction. It put the number on the fear. 200 knots, not a guess, but a threshold. It named the exact direction the enemy could not roll. It exposed the precise mechanical reason an engine would quit on a pushover. It let American engineers and pilots stop guessing and start measuring. When another test pilot looked over the results, he remarked that the airplane behaved almost exactly as intelligence had already predicted. And that was the point. The captured Zero confirmed the answer, quantified it, and sharpened it to a fine edge, so that a young pilot fresh from training could be handed not a rumor but a rule. A measured advantage, not a miracle. But in a war of narrow margins, a measured advantage is the difference between the man who dives away and the man who does not come home. A Japanese officer would later judge the loss of that single airplane a blow to his country nearly as grave as a lost battle. He was not wrong to fear it. And the strangest part, the part that turns the whole story back on itself, is that none of it came from a victory. No American ace shot this prize out of the sky. No brilliant plan captured it. The most valuable fighter the United States acquired in the Pacific War was handed over by accident, by a bullet in an oil line and a patch of ground that looked like grass and was not. A carpenter's son, 19 years old, trying only to set his crippled airplane down gently enough to fly it home again, made one small choice, wheels down instead of belly in, and in that choice delivered to his enemy the blueprint of the machine that had made his side invincible. He never knew. He was already gone before the plane stopped skidding. The airplane itself would not survive the war either. In 1945, a taxiing American dive bomber would swing out of control and chop the captured Zero to pieces on the ground, an inglorious end for a machine that had given up so much. But long before that, on a grey afternoon at the edge of the world, it lay in a cold Aleutian bog with its wheels in the air and its skin unbroken and its secrets waiting. A legend that could not be caught, finally, quietly, catching itself. The wind moved over the muskeg. The meadow was empty, and the most feared fighter in the Pacific rested upside down in the mud, giving everything away.